You know, it's easy to think some older tech is, well, past it. But then you hear something like this. Perl, right. Been around ages. It ships with over 500,000 automated tests. 500,000.
Yeah, it's pretty staggering. Over 521,000 now, I think, in the latest stable release.
Just think about that. Every update, they run all those tests.
Exactly. It ensures things don't break. That's huge for stability.
It's not just old. It feels incredibly solid because of that.
It absolutely translates to confidence for developers using it for, really critical systems. It's a big part of why it's still so trusted.
Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a closer look at Perl programming.
And our guide is the book Beginning Perl by Curtis Ovid Poe.
Now, look, even if coding isn't your thing, stick around. Perl's kind of this hidden engine, you know?
Right. It powers a lot of the web, crunches data, keeps systems running.
It's like the plumbing in a building, maybe. You don't see it, but you know if it broke.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
And Ovid's book is great because he's not just academic about it. He's used Perl in the trenches for, over a decade?
Yeah, so he connects the dots between the theory and, like, actual real-world use.
And it's packed with exercises, examples. If you want to actually get something quickly, that practical approach is key.
Exactly. So think of this as our highlight reel. We've gone through the book, pulled out the really important bits.
Give you a feel for why Perl still matters and what it can do.
Right, without drowning you in code. We'll touch on the basics, how it handles info.
Scalars, arrays, hashes.
Then organizing code, web stuff, testing, kind of the whole picture, but the key parts.
It's like the executive summary.
So first things first, what is Perl, fundamentally? People sometimes write it in all caps, P-E-R-L. Is that right?
Yeah, common misconception. No, it's just Perl for the language itself.
Okay.
And then lowercase Perl usually refers to the actual program, the interpreter that runs the code.
Good distinction, worth remembering.
Definitely helps avoid confusion down the line.
Okay, so the book calls it a dynamic programming language. Let's unpack that a bit. How's that different from, say, Java?
Well, think about Java or C++ Latch. They're more static, right?
Yeah.
A lot of checks happen before you run the code at compile time.
Right.
Dynamic languages like Perl or Python, Ruby, they're more flexible. They figure more things out while the program is actually running.
So more adaptable on the fly.
Exactly. That often means you can develop faster, iterate more quickly. It's like adjusting a recipe if you cook instead of having a rigid plan locked in stone.
Okay, I see the appeal, faster development.
Yeah, but the trade-off sometimes is that certain errors might only pop up when you actually run it.
But that's where those 500,000 tests come back in, right? To catch those runtime issues.
Precisely. Perl has very robust mechanisms to ensure stability, despite that dynamic nature.
And the book also mentions backward compatibility for Perl 5.
Yes, that's a huge focus. The core team, the P5P as they're sometimes called, works really hard so that new Perl versions don't break old code.
That's reassuring if you're going to invest time learning it.
Definitely. Your skills won't suddenly become obsolete. And again, those tests, 455,000 even back in version 5.13.2, that's a serious commitment to stability.
So if someone's listening and thinking, okay, maybe I'll try this, how do they get started? Is installation tricky?
No, usually pretty straightforward. The book covers it. One good tip it gives is if your system already has Perl installed, which is common, Macs used to, lots of Linux systems do.
Right, for system tasks.
Yeah, it's often smart to install your own separate version for your projects.
So you don't mess with the systems version, like having your own toolbox.
Exactly. Keep things separate and clean.
Now here's something that sounds really cool. CPAN, the Comprehensive Perl Archive Network.
Yes, CPAN. You mentioned app stores.
Yeah.
CPAN's kind of like that, but on a whole different scale, specifically for Perl. It's described as the largest collection of open source code for any single language.
Wow. Large.
It's massive. It's maintained by a global community. Think of this enormous library.
Yeah.
Chances are, if you have a programming problem, someone's already written a solution, a module, and put it on CPAN.
So you don't have to reinvent the wheel constantly.
Absolutely not. For countless common tasks, even really niche things, there's probably a module you can just grab and plug into your code. It's incredibly powerful.
The book even mentions finding the book itself using its ISBN number, 978-1188-013847.
Right, like a unique identifier. Just like CPAN modules have unique names. Helps you find exactly what you need.
And it's not just code, right? There are communities, too.
Oh, yeah. The book points to places like Perl Monks Online. It's a huge forum, very active.
For beginners and experts?
All levels. People asking questions, sharing solutions. It's described as all Perl, all the time. Massive archive of discussions, too, like a 247 study group.
That's invaluable for learning.
Definitely.
Okay, give us a taste of Perl's power quickly. The book talks about one-liners.
Ah, the one-liners. Yeah, they're kind of legendary. Short, sometimes cryptic-looking commands you type right into the command line.
To do what?
Quick tasks, often text manipulation. The book shows an example. Replacing some text, say version 13 to version 14, across loads of files at once.
One command.
One command. And it even shows making backups of the original files as part of that single line. It's like a Swiss Army knife for text.
That's seriously efficient.
It really shows how concise Perl can be for certain tasks. The book contrasts it with the full, longer script to make the point.
And for longer scripts, you put them in a file, usually ending .pl.
Yep, that's the standard. Save it in a .pl file. Run it with Perl your script.pl.
And that first line, the hashtag.us or in Perl thing, the shebang.
Right, the shebang line.
Yeah.
That tells the operating system, hey, use the Perl interpreter found at this path to run this script.
So you can just run the script directly sometimes?
Yeah, exactly. Though the book adds a good practical tip. For bigger projects, it's better to package them properly and install them using standard tools like CPAN or CPAN.
Yeah.
Ensures consistency across different machines.
Okay, makes sense. So we know what Perl is, how to get it running. Let's dig into the core concepts. Starting with scalar data. What's a scalar?
Simplest terms. A scalar holds a single piece of data. Just one thing.
Like what?
Could be a string of text, a word, a sentence, or it could be a number like 5 or 3.14.
And assigning strings. Single quotes versus double quotes. The book makes a point about that.
Yeah, it's a key difference. Single quotes are literal. What you type is exactly what you get. If you put N inside single quotes, Perl sees \N.
Okay.
Double quotes are different. They allow escape sequences, so N becomes an actual new line character.
Like hitting enter.
Right. And crucially, double quotes do variable interpolation. You can embed a variable right inside the string, and Perl replaces it with its value.
Ah, handy. Like filling in the blanks. What about numbers? Any potential gotchas? The book mentions floating point numbers.
Yes, it touches on something common to many languages, actually. Floating point numbers, numbers with decimals. Computers store them in binary.
Zeros and ones.
Right. And just like you can't perfectly represent 13 as a decimal, 0.333, sometimes decimal numbers can't be perfectly represented in binary.
So you get tiny inaccuracies.
Tiny ones, yeah. The book shows an example where multiplying 4.39 by 100 might, surprisingly, result in something like 438.999 internally. So taking the integer part gives 438 instead of 439.
Huh. Okay, good to know for precise calculations like financial stuff.
Definitely something to be aware of. You might need specific modules or techniques for high-precision math.
All right, so scalars are single items. What about collections? Arrays.
Arrays are ordered lists. Think of a numbered list, starting from item 0, then 1, 2, and so on.
Like a shopping list with line numbers.
Exactly. And you access an item using its index number in square brackets. So shopping list dollar would be the first item.
Wait, shopping list? I thought arrays started with at.
Ah, good catch. The array itself is at shopping list, but when you access a single element from the array, you use the $sign, a dollar, because a single element is a scalar. That trips people up sometimes.
Okay, array index for one item. Got it. Are they fixed size?
Nope. Very flexible. You can add or remove items easily. They grow and shrink as needed.
But what if you try to access an index that doesn't exist, like item 10 in a 5-item list?
Perl often won't complain right away, which can be tricky. The value you get back might be undefined or empty. If you then try to use that undef value later, it might cause issues or unexpected behavior.
Okay. Need to be careful there. And what's this QW thing the book mentions? Looks weird.
QW stands for quote words. Just a handy shortcut. Instead of typing apple, banana, cherry.
With all the quotes and commas.
Right. You can just type QW, apple, banana, cherry, or maybe QW.apple, banana, cherry. You pick a delimiter, like parentheses or exclamation marks, list the words separated by spaces, and Perl automatically creates a list of those strings.
Ah, neat. Cuts down on typing for simple word lists.
Exactly. Very convenient for that.
Okay, so arrays are ordered lists using numbers. What about looking things up by name? Like a dictionary. That's ashes, right?
Precisely. Hashes are unordered collections of key-value pairs. No numerical index. You use a unique string key to look up its associated value.
Like word and definition.
Perfect analogy. The book shows accessing a value using curly braces. So dictionary word gives you the definition.
And the keys? Are they always strings?
Perl generally treats them as strings, yeah. Even if you write hash or a hash variable name, Perl usually auto-quotes that key internally into a string like 1, 2, or 3 or variable name.
Interesting. How do you loop through everything in a hash if it's unordered?
A common way is using the keys function. Keys percent of my hash gives you back a list of all the keys.
Just the keys.
Just the keys, in no particular order. Then you can loop through that list of keys, and for each K, grab the corresponding value from the hash using my hash key.
Okay, so you get the keys, then loop and grab values. Makes sense. If you need order, you'd have to sort the keys first, I guess.
Exactly right. You'd sort keys percent my hash.
The book also mentions package variables briefly, with long names like mycompany.stuff.variable.
Yeah, those are about organizing code, especially in larger applications. Think of packages as namespaces.
To avoid name collisions.
Precisely. If you have a variable percent department number 4 in your My Company stuff package, it won't clash with a variable of the same name somewhere else.
So percent mycompany.stuff.department number 4 is unique.
Right. It's accessible from anywhere that knows about the My Company stuff package. But yeah, typing those full names can be a bit much sometimes.
Okay, let's talk scope and best practices. The book hammers home use strict and use warnings.
Oh, absolutely essential. Consider them non-negotiable, really, even for tiny scripts.
Why so vital?
Use strict enforces discipline. Mainly, it makes you declare your variables, usually with my, before you use them.
And that helps how?
Catches tons of typos. If you mistype a variable name, strict will complain because it hasn't been declared. Saves massive debugging headaches.
I can see that. And use warnings.
That tells Perl to warn you about things that aren't necessarily errors but might be problematic or indicate a logic flaw, dubious code, potential pitfalls.
So together, they're like a built-in quality check.
Exactly. They push you towards writing cleaner, safer, more maintainable code from the get-go. The book also shows a basic hello world, using it argv.
Right, to get arguments from the command line.
Yeah, the array at argv holds whatever you typed after the script name.
And there are other special built-in variables, too.
Loads of them, historically. Things like dollars. The book mentions PerlDoc. Perlvar is the place to look them up.
Do you need to know them all?
Oh, definitely not for everyday coding. Most are quite obscure now. But knowing they exist helps if you see them in older code.
Okay. And the book wraps up this part with a glossary recap. Arrays, hashes, slices.
Slices are grabbing multiple elements at once, like a Rival 135.
Right. And scope, lexical versus package.
Lexical scope with means the variable only exists within its enclosing block, like inside curly braces. A package scope is broader.
Built-ins, context.
Context is huge in Perl. How Perl interprets something often depends on whether it expects a single value scalar context or a list context.
It's strict again. Foundational stuff.
Absolutely. Understanding these is key before moving on to doing things with the data, which
Right.
brings us to operators.
Right, the symbols that do the work, plus, minus, equals. But Perl's flexible type system plays a role here, doesn't it?
It does. Perl often cares more about how you're using the data than its declared type. So many operators work on different data types.
Like string operators, EQ.
Exactly. Eq for string equality, nay for string in LT, DT, late EQ for less than, greater than comparisons.
And crump.
Crump is the comparison operator. It returns next to 1, 0, or 1, depending on whether the first string is less than, equal to, or greater than the second.
Crucially, these compare strings like in a dictionary, right? Lexicographically.
Yes, that's the key point. It compares character by character, which leads to that classic gotcha.
100 versus 99.
Right. As strings would say 100 is less than 99 because 1 comes before 9. Big trap if you're expecting numerical comparison.
So you need different operators for numbers.
You do. The standard math ones, plus Banny, and for exponentiation.
And the book mentions operator precedence, like multiplication before addition.
Yeah, the standard order of operations applies. But the strong advice is use parentheses to make it unambiguous. Don't rely on remembering precedence rules.
Good advice. Makes code easier to read, too.
Definitely. The book also quickly covers some numeric functions.
Get the integer part. Chops off the decimal.
Yep.
Right.
For natural logarithm. And randsrand for random number.
How do they work?
Gives you a random fractional number, usually between 0 and 1, or 0 and some limit you specify. Srand seeds the random number generator, so you get different sequences each time you run.
Okay. What about making decisions? True or false stuff? Boolean operators.
Right. Perl evaluates conditions as true or false. It has numeric comparison operators for equality aggregator, for inequality.
So double equals equals for numbers, eq for strings. You have to use the right one.
Absolutely critical. Using the wrong set gives unexpected results, like the 100 versus 99 issue.
And how does Perl decide what's true or false, generally?
Lots of things evaluate as false. The number 0, the strings, empty string, and 0, undef, and an empty list or hash in scalar context. Pretty much everything else is true.
Okay. And you use these in I-false statements.
That's the fundamental way.
If condition.
The book also shows the Eiffel not operators to negate a condition.
Now, the book highlights grep and map. These sound powerful for lists.
Oh, yeah, Perl staples.
Yeah.
Super useful. Grep is like a filter.
How so?
You give it a condition in a list, it goes through the list and returns a new list containing only the elements that satisfy the condition.
Like picking out all the even numbers from a list.
Exactly. Or all strings longer than 5 characters.
And map.
Map is about transformation. It takes a list, applies some operation to each element, and returns a new list with the results.
Like doubling every number in a list.
No. Perfect example. Or converting every string to uppercase. They're incredibly efficient ways to process collections.
And logical operators.
Right, and it's logical. AND, both sides must be true, is logical. OR, at least one side must be true, for combining conditions.
Okay, we can make decisions. How about repetition? Loops. The book covers for each.
For each is probably the most common loop. It iterates over every element in a list or array. Like for each my item.
Item holds the current element each time through.
Yes, but here's a key point the book stresses. Item is actually an alias to the element in the original list.
Meaning
if you modify item inside the loop, you are changing the actual value in the original list.
whoa, okay, that could be surprising if you didn't expect it.
It can be. Useful sometimes, dangerous others. The loop shows how to make a copy if you want to avoid modifying the original.
It also showed using a hash and a for each loop to find unique elements.
Yeah, that's a classic Perl idiom. You loop through the list, using each item as a hash key. Since keys are unique, you end up with a hash whose keys are the unique items from the list. Very efficient.
Clever. What about other loops? While and until.
They loop based on a condition, not a list. While condition keeps looping as long as the condition is true.
And until.
Until condition loops as long as the condition is false. They're opposites. Useful when you don't know in advance how many times you need to loop.
Like reading from a file until you hit the end.
Exactly. The book also mentions each, which is specifically for iterating through key-value pairs in a hash, one pair at a time.
And if you're inside a loop and want to skip ahead or break out?
Perl has next and last. Next immediately jumps to the start of the next iteration, skipping the rest of the current one.
Like continue in some other languages.
Right, and last breaks out of the loop entirely, like break.
Handy controls. The book also mentions statement modifiers, like print high if to condition.
Yeah, they're a concise alternative for simple conditional actions on a single statement. Readability can be good for simple cases. If, unless, while, until.
Finally, given when. It sounds like a quit statement.
It is, basically. Introduced in Perl 5 down. Provides a structured way to check a variable against multiple possible values or patterns, when clauses, cleaner than a long chain of if-else.
Okay. Now, a potentially tricky topic, references. The book says they're like pointers.
Sort of, yeah. Think of a reference as a scalar value that points to something else, another variable. An array, a hash, even a subroutine. It's like having the memory address.
Why use them?
They allow you to build more complex data structures, like arrays of arrays or hashes where the values are other hashes. They also let you pass large data structures to subroutines efficiently without copying everything.
How do you create one? The book shows a backslash.
Right. At my array creates a reference to the array at my array. Somebody says my query creates a reference to the hash percent my hash.
And getting the data back.
Yeah.
Dereferencing.
Yep. If array_ref holds a reference to an array, you use @ref or just @array to get the whole array back.
Okay.
Given a single element, you use the arrow operator, the array_ref index. Similarly for hashes, #ref key.
Arrow operator. Got it. What about anonymous references?
Those are references to data structures you create on the spot without giving the original structure a name. Using square brackets creates an anonymous array and returns a reference to it. Using curly braces creates an anonymous hash and returns a reference. They're fundamental for building those complex nested structures we mentioned.
Like a list where each item is itself another list?
Exactly. My @list_of_lists equals 1, 2, 3, 4. Here @list_of_lists contains 2 array references.
Okay, I can see how that gets complex. Debugging must be fun.
Which is why the book strongly recommends the data dumper module.
What does that do?
It takes any variable, especially references or complex structures, and prints out its contents in a readable Perl format. Invaluable for seeing what's really inside your variables.
Like a snapshot of the data structure.
Precisely. Especially helpful because just printing a reference itself usually just shows you something like Arrow by Cyril by 7F, which is very informative. Data dumper shows the actual contents.
Makes sense. The book warns against soft or symbolic references.
Yeah, best to avoid them.
Yeah.
A hard reference, the kind we've been discussing, points directly to the data. A soft reference just holds the name of a variable as a string.
Why is that bad?
It's less safe, more prone to weird errors. If the variable name changes or doesn't exist when you try to use the soft reference, things can break unexpectedly. Use strict actually forbids them, which is another good reason to always use strict. Stick to hard references.
Okay, solid advice. So we have data structures, references. Let's talk organization, subroutines, like functions elsewhere.
Exactly. Reusable blocks of code. You define them using the sub keyword, give them a name, and put the code inside curly braces.
My subroutine. How do you pass data in?
Any arguments you pass when calling the subroutine automatically appear inside it in a special array called @pack.
The underscore array @.
Yep. It's local to the subroutine. The most common way to get arguments out of that is using the shift operator. My first arg, shift, takes the first element off, it's signed. My second arg is shift, takes the next one.
Okay, shift pulls them off one by one. Can you set defaults?
Sure. Inside the sub, you can check if a variable received from shift is defined, and if not, assign a default value, like my argolf shift default, using the defined or operator to
And getting data out.
use the return keyword, return result, or return result 1, result 2 equals. The last expression evaluated in a sub is also implicitly returned if there's no explicit return.
You can return multiple values just by listing them.
Yep. Perl handles returning lists naturally.
What about the state keyword? Perl 5.10 plus keyer. Sounds useful.
It is.
Yeah.
State declares a variable inside a subroutine that keeps its value between calls, but is still lexically scoped to that subroutine.
So it remembers its value, but isn't global.
Exactly. The book shows using it for a counter, like state call count 0, call count plus. Each time you call the sub, call count increments. Before state, you'd need variables outside the sub to do that. State is cleaner.
Nice. What if a subroutine needs lots of arguments? Just shifting them all seems error-prone.
It can be. For more than a couple of arguments, the book recommends passing named arguments using a hash.
How does that work?
Instead of my sub, arg1, arg2, arg3, you call it like my sub, name, age, city. You pass key value pairs.
And inside the sub?
Inside contains that list of pairs. You typically assign it to a hash. My %argsades @. Then you access arguments by name. Arg's name? Much clearer, less dependent on order.
Yeah, I like that. More readable. What about errors inside subs?
Die. Die is the way to stop execution immediately and report a fatal error. Die. Something went wrong. Reason. It prints the message to standard error, STDERR, and halts the program.
But what if you want to catch an error, not just crash?
That's where evil comes in. You wrap code that might die inside an evil block.
Okay.
If the code inside the evil block runs without dying, evil returns the result. If the code does die, the program doesn't stop. Instead, the special variable $@ gets set to the error message that die produced.
So you can check $ after the evil block to see if something went wrong.
Exactly. Lets you handle errors gracefully, maybe log them, try something else.
Okay.
The book shows using evil to try loading a module that might not be installed.
Clever. The book also mentions anonymous subs and closures. Sounds advanced.
A bit, yeah. An anonymous subroutine is just sub without a name. You usually assign it to a variable. My coderef sub.dot. Then you can call it using coderef.
Okay. And closures?
A closure is an anonymous subroutine that remembers variables from the scope where it was defined, even after that scope is finished. Lets you create functions with persistent private data. Powerful concept.
Right. And quickly, prototypes and recursion.
Prototypes let you specify the kinds of arguments a sub expects. The book says they can be complex, use with caution, read the docs. Recursion is when a sub calls itself. Useful for certain problems like traversing trees. Book mentions memorization as an optimization caching results of recursive calls.
Okay, lots packed into subroutines. Now, a big one. Regular expressions. The book dedicates a whole chapter. Essential Perl skill.
Oh, absolutely fundamental, especially given Perl's origins in text processing. Rejects are patterns for matching text.
So finding phone numbers, email addresses, that kind of thing.
Exactly, but also much more. The book starts with basics, matching literal characters, then quantifiers. For 0 or more, plus for 1 or more, for 0 or 1, M for between N and M times.
Controlling repetition, and they're greedy.
By default, yes. M plus try to match the longest possible string. Adding a question mark makes them lazy or non-greedy. Plus, matching the shortest possible string, important distinction.
And those backslash things.
Yeah.
DSW.
Handy shortcuts. D matches any digit. D non-digit. S matches white space, space, tab, new line. S non-white space. W matches word characters, letters, numbers, underscore. W non-word character. B matches a word boundary. Saves a lot of typing.
Okay. How do you pull out parts of the match? Like just the area code from a phone number?
Capturing parentheses. Wrap the part of the pattern you want to capture in parentheses. After a successful match, Perl stores the captured substrings in special variables like $1, $2, etc., or you can get them as a list.
Ah, $1 for the first capture, $2 for the second?
Right. The book also covers modifiers you add at the end. I for case-insensitive matching, G for global, find all matches, not just the first, M for multi-line mode, makes and $match start end of lines, not just string, X to allow white space and comments in the rejects for readability.
X sounds useful for complex patterns.
Very much so. It also mentions anchors for start of string, or line with M, for end of string, or line with M.
What about matching specific sets of characters, like vowels?
Character classes, using square brackets. AU matches any single lowercase vowel. AZ matches any letter. Ranges work 0, 9. A caret inside negates it. 0 and 9 matches anything but a digit.
Okay. This can get complicated fast. Any more advanced features?
Grouping with parentheses, sometimes non-capturing, like look ahead and look behind assertions, lets you match based on context without including it in the match itself. Very powerful.
And named captures. Perl 5.sen plus A.
Yes, really improves readability. Instead of $1, $2, you can do name in the pattern and then access the captured value using plus name. Much clearer what plus area code means versus $1.
Definitely. The book mentions the substitution operator S too.
The workhorse for search and replace. Pattern replacement finds the pattern and replaces it with the replacement string. Has modifiers like G to replace all occurrences.
It also warns about trying to perfectly match things like email or HTML with one regex.
Yeah, it's a common trap. While you can write regexes for them, they become incredibly complex and fragile. Usually better to use dedicated CPAN modules designed for parsing those formats robustly, like email.valid or HTML parsers.
Use the right tool for the job.
Exactly. The book shows a nice example using named captures to convert date formats, though. Shows the practical benefit clearly.
And points to PerlDoc, PerlAir, PerlRotet for more. Sounds like a deep topic.
It is, but incredibly useful once you get the hang of it.
Okay, let's shift to interacting with the outside world. Files and directories. How does Perl handle that?
Pretty straightforward basics.
Yeah.
You use the open function, open my $5 and file name, opens file name for reading.
$5 is the file handle, like a name for the open file.
Exactly. Use $5 in other operations.
Yeah.
Is for writing, overwrites the file, is for appending.
What about errors, if the file doesn't exist?
Open returns false on failure and sets the special error variable, $bang. You traditionally check that, open or die. Cannot open file name.
Or the book mentions auto die.
Right, use auto die. From 5.10 built 1 onwards, makes Perl automatically die on errors for functions like open, close, etc. Saves you writing the order checks everywhere. Very handy.
Okay, files open for reading with $5. How do you read it?
The angle bracket operator, $5. In a while loop, while my line equals my hours, reads the file line by line until the end.
Line gets each line, including the new line character at the end.
Usually, yes. That's why you often see trump line right after reading to remove that trailing new line.
And you can split the line, like if it's comma separated.
Yep, my add field split splits the line on commas into the add fields array.
What if you don't assign $5 to a variable?
Then, like many Perl operations, it often defaults to using the special variable $. So while my add test works too, operating implicitly on $.
Okay. How about checking file properties? Is it a file, a directory?
File test operators, they look like FFD
Ah.
uses at FS readable. W size is non-zero. You use them like if, F file name. Lots of them.
Useful for checking before you act. What's the diamond operator?
It's special. If you run your script like Perl myscript.pl, file1.txt, file2.txt, then while inside the script will read every line from file1.txt first, then automatically move on and read every line from file2.txt.
So it automatically processes files named on the command line.
Exactly. Super convenient for writing command line utilities that process multiple files.
What about working with directories themselves? Listing files.
Basic functions are open_dir, reader, close_dir, similar pattern to files, open to directory handle, read entries one by one with read inside a loop, then close it.
Reader gives you file names.
Yes, including and current and parent directory,
Oh,
which you
right.
usually want to skip. For more complex stuff, like recursively scanning directories, the book points to modules like file, find, or file, find.rule.
Yeah.
Much easier than rolling your own recursion.
Right. Now, a potentially tricky area, Unicode and character encodings, UTF-8, etc.
Crucial topic, especially now. The book stresses understanding that text isn't just bytes. It has an encoding. Perl's internal strings can handle Unicode well, but you need to manage input and output.
Meaning?
Generally, when you read data from a file network, you should decode it from its original encoding, like UTF-8, into Perl's internal format.
And when writing out?
You should encode it from Perl's internal format into the desired output encoding, like UTF-8.
How do you do that?
The encode module is key. Encode.decode UTF-8 bytes, encode-n, encode UTF-8 file name. You can also add encoding layers to file handles with open mic encoding UTF-8 file name.
So Perl can handle the decoding coding automatically on reads-writes.
Yes, using those I/O layers is often the easiest way. The book also mentions the use2fide-f, pragma, which tells Perl your script itself is saved as UTF-8, allowing Unicode characters directly in your source code, and char names for using names like nsnomen.
Seems important to get right to avoid garbled text.
Absolutely vital in modern software.
The book shows an example of recursively printing a directory tree.
Yeah, a classic example combining opendoor, read-air, the file test fnd, and recursion, a subroutine calling itself, to navigate down through subdirectories. Shows how those pieces fit together.
Okay, files and directories covered. The book then revisits sorting, grepping, and mapping, but maybe in more detail.
Yeah, it kind of ties together list processing.
Yeah.
It reiterates grep for filtering lists based on a condition, using either a code block or a simple expression.
And map for transforming each element.
Right, applying an operation to every item and getting a new list of results.
And sorting, beyond the basic dictionary sort.
Yes, the real power is the custom sort block. Sort blocky at numbers sorts numerically is the numeric comparison operator. Sort ball deal sorts in reverse numeric order.
All the ballers are special variables inside the sort block.
Yes, Perl sets them to pairs of elements from the list being compared. Your block just needs to return -1, 0, or 1 to indicate if A comes before, is equal to, or comes after ball authors.
So you can write complex logic. The book mentions sorting employee data.
Right. You could sort by seniority first, then if seniority is equal, sort by pay, then if pay is equal, sort by name alphabetically. You just chain the comparisons in the sort block using seniority pay and pay A name, PB name, add employees.
Wow, okay. That's flexible. And creating reusable sort subs.
Yeah, if the logic is complex, you could put it in its own subroutine and just use sort my comparison sub at list.
And combining grep and sort.
A common pattern. Filter first with grep to get the items you care about, then pipe the result into sort to order them. Efficient and often very readable. Sort it at original list.
That seems like a really powerful combination for data wrangling.
It definitely is. Perl excels at that kind of task.
Well, that feels like a really solid overview of the core ideas in beginning Perl. We've covered quite a bit.
We have, from the very basics of what Perl is, scalars, arrays, hashes.
Through operators, control flow, subroutines for organization.
The power of regular expressions, handling files and directories, and these list processing tools like grep, map, and sort.
It gives a real sense of Perl's breadth and its practical focus.
It's designed to get things done, for sure.
And throughout, the importance of CPAN and the community really shines through in the book's descriptions.
Absolutely. CPAN is Perl's superpower, arguably, and the community is incredibly knowledgeable and generally very helpful. Huge assets.
So here's a final thought to leave everyone with. Perl's been around, it's stable, tested, still widely used. It makes you wonder, what other older technologies might we be overlooking? What established tools still hold surprising relevance or untapped potential in today's, constantly changing tech world?
That is a good question. Do we sometimes dismiss things just because they aren't brand new? Maybe there's enduring value and maturity and stability that we forget sometimes. Lessons to be learned, perhaps.
Definitely something to mull over. If your interest in Perl has been piqued, do check out the resources, Ovid's book, Beginning Perl, explore CPAN online, visit Perl Monks.
And don't forget the built-in docs with Perl Doc. Even a basic grasp of these Perl concepts can be surprisingly useful across different tech roles.
And hey, if you use Perl or have questions we didn't touch on, let us know. We'd love to hear your experiences.
Yeah, share your thoughts, keep the conversation going.